right? So very quickly, if you remember, when Arjuna presented his various arguments, the first argument that Arjuna presented, it's about misplaced compassion, about false compassion or misplaced compassion. And to counteract that argument, Krishna quoted the philosophy of Sankhya Yoga, right? The philosophy of Sankhya, or it's also called as Gyana Yoga, right? Or you may, or we'll just use the word Gyana at this point. We'll not include the yoga. I'll elaborate this a little later in the discussion, right? He used the philosophy of Sankhya and Gyana, where basically he explained the concept of body and soul, the body versus soul philosophy, to basically drive home the point that, look, you are showing false compassion. Real compassion is to be shown to the soul and not just to the body, right? So then the next argument that Arjuna made after false compassion was about lose and lose, loss and loss, right? In both the cases, whether he loses, whether he wins, it's a loss for him. Whether loses, it's a loss for him. And Krishna quoted the philosophy of Sakama karma. Sakama karma here means the fruitive work, where basically Krishna gave Arjuna the allurement of heaven. Look, if you win, you're going to enjoy the kingdom. If you lose, you'll enjoy the heaven. So that way it's the philosophy of enjoyment. Sakama. Kama means here desire. Motivated by desire, actions motivated by desire. Remember, we used the term attached engagement in the previous class, right? So he uses that philosophy, the philosophy of fruitive work, right? And with that, he converts the entire argument from loss and loss to win and win. So it's a victory in both cases for him, right? Then, so if you remember, that's when he, therefore, just engage your duty as a Kshatriya, then it's a win-win situation for you. That's what he quotes in text number 38. Then at 39, in the second chapter 39, Krishna shifts the gears, and now he's going to talk some real deeper philosophy. And Arjuna's third argument in this context was about his fear of sin. And how does Krishna defeat this argument? By talking the philosophy of Buddhi Yoga, right? So this was the subtle point which I wanted you all of you to grasp. The essential principle of Buddhi Yoga is that actions do not lead to sin, right? It's not about Arjuna as a Kshatriya killing someone. It is not that action as a Kshatriya which is leading to sin, but it is our intentions. It is our intentions that lead to sin. And if the intention is detached, if internally one is detached, then even though if one is engaged in an action, one does not get affected by sin. So this is the beautiful path of Buddhi Yoga that Krishna gave Arjuna in the end of second chapter. That you don't have to give up your actions, but you just have to change your intentions from attached to detached, right? Become detached in your intentions, in your attitude, right? So this shift, and what was that golden formula that we discussed? We discussed that how this Buddhi Yoga, right? We discussed how it is action, that is karma, on the solid platform of Gyana, with the mood and intention of bhakti, right? So because the intention is not to enjoy your engagement as a Kshatriya or whatever. For Arjuna's case, it is a Kshatriya. For you and me, it is our own day-to-day activities, right? Because the intention is not that of enjoyment, but rather some higher purpose here, right? In this case, a higher devotional purpose. Such a action will not lead to bondage. And this was the principle that Krishna wanted to drive home to Arjuna. However, Arjuna did not understand this point upfront, right? And we'll try to understand Arjuna's confusion, right? So in text number 1, Arjuna says, "Oh Krishna, why do you want me to engage? Why do you want to engage me in this ghastly warfare if you think that intelligence is better than fruitive work? In fact, my intelligence is bewildered by your equivocal instructions. Therefore, please tell me decisively what will be most beneficial for me." Right? Now, this understanding what is Arjuna's confusion is a big confusion for many readers of Bhagavad Gita. Right? So we'll try to very systematically decode this. And if you just understand this, you'll make a, we'll make a great progress in our study of Bhagavad Gita. Right? So let's try to understand this. So if you see in chapter number 2, mainly there are 3 paths or 3 philosophies that Krishna presents, right? The first philosophy was the philosophy of Sankhya, or we will use the word Gyana. Next, there was a philosophy of Sakama Karma. Right? So from the terminologies that we used in our class, this Gyana is or Sankhya is the same as detached disengagement. Detached disengagement. And the Sakama Karma was attached engagement. And there was a third philosophy also, which Krishna spoke about, which is our Buddhi Yoga philosophy. And if you remember, the term that we used for it was detached. Right? Internally, one is detached, but externally, one is still engaged in work, engagement. Right? So if you compare these 3 philosophies, mainly on the basis of 2 parameters. What are the 2 parameters? First, in terms of action. Second, in terms of their internal detachment. Right? So let's compare these 3 systems based on these 2 parameters. Now, if you look at it in terms of action, the Sankhya process has no action, right? But definitely it is heavily filled with detachment, right? That's why the term detached disengagement, right? If you compare the concept of Sakama Karma, definitely there is action, but internally there is no detachment. That is why it is the motivation for action comes not from detachment, but they want to enjoy the fruits of their actions. They want to go to heaven or enjoy the worldly kingdom, right? So that was the motivation. So therefore, that was called, in terms of detachment, there is no detachment, but in terms of action, yes, there is action. Now, this is interesting. In terms of Buddhi Yoga, there is external action and there is also internal detachment. Right? That was the hybrid process. Now, when Krishna was presenting this whole philosophy, this Buddhi Yoga philosophy, Krishna was looking at Buddhi Yoga from the detachment perspective. If you look at that detachment column, both Gyana and Buddhi Yoga, they are exactly the same. Both involve detachment, whereas the attached engagement or Sakama Karma is different. So from Krishna's perspective, Gyana and Buddhi Yoga are as good as same, because whether you are acting or not acting, internally you are detached and therefore you are protected. That is Krishna's perspective. But our Arjuna was not looking at that perspective. He was looking at it in terms of the action column. And you look at it from the action perspective, which 2 are similar here? Can you point out? Right? Think again. Sakama Karma, and Buddhi Yoga, they look the same because externally there is action involved, whereas Gyana is different because there is no action involved. So Arjuna was looking at the column from this perspective. And Krishna was trying to present to Arjuna from the detachment perspective. Therefore, from Krishna's perspective, there were only two important paths or two bona fide paths that he's recommending. And this is a theme that will continue throughout the Bhagavad Gita. Throughout the Bhagavad Gita, we'll hear about this Sankhya / Gyana, this kind of an integrated yoga or Buddhi Yoga. Of course, the main highlight is on the Buddhi Yoga, but Sankhya Yoga is also a bona fide process for somebody who's very internally, very pure and very sattvic. For such a person who have already achieved a very high level of natural detachment, for them, that process works. But for ordinary people, right, Buddhi Yoga is the way to engage, to remain connected in this world and still develop the detachment, right? That is Krishna's perspective. So this was the confusion in Arjuna's mind, because clearly, if you remember, when Krishna begins at Buddhi Yoga section after from text number 239 onwards, if you see some of the verses there, right? I'm talking about text number 45, where he says, Krishna says, Traigunyo Vishaya Veda. The Vedas mainly deal with three modes of material nature, rise above this fruitive work, etc., etc. So when Krishna is condemning the path of fruitive work, Arjuna thought Krishna is condemning work itself, right? So then why did he talk so much about this whole Buddhi Yoga, which involves work? So that was a confusion in Arjuna's mind, because Arjuna was purely looking at the action column. But from Krishna's perspective, Sakama Karma or attached engagement is nothing. It's not a recommendation that Krishna is giving in fact, if you see later on in the next verse itself, Krishna is going to completely discard that, right? Let's actually see the next verse in text number 3. Krishna says, Lokesmin Dividha Nishta Pura Prokta Mayanagha. There are two classes of people which I have previously spoken. What are they? Gyana Yogena Sankhyana, Karma Yogena Yoginam. So he's mainly talking about two paths here. One is, right, Gyana Yogena Sankhyanam. So Gyana Yoga or Sankhya is one path. Then he uses the term Karma Yogena Yoginam. He uses the word now Karma Yoga, indicating basically it is the path of action. So Karma Yoga here, terminologically, the word that Krishna is referring to is, there is a spiritual process, a spiritual yoga, which involves action. Therefore, it is called Karma Yoga, the yoga of action, right? So when Arjuna made this question, it's good that Arjuna raised this question, because when a student raises the question, then the teacher knows how much they have understood or not understood. So Krishna, being the expert teacher, right, he understands that Arjuna did not understand anything, right? So what does Krishna do? He starts from the basics. So again, Krishna being the very kind teacher, look what he does. So when a subject matter is very complicated, what to do is to break it down into fragments, right? So this is what Krishna does. So Krishna suddenly spoke of an advanced concept of detached engagement. So because Arjuna did not get his head around this whole concept of how can you be detached and also engage in work, right? Because he could not get his head around this concept, Krishna being the expert teacher, now he's going to very systematically dissect that topic, right? Now, this is a very important point. There's a difference between diluting a topic and dissecting a topic. Diluting a topic means you are completely changing the very spirit of the teaching, right? But an expert teacher never dilutes the topic, but dissects the topic and gives it into small pieces. Okay, if this whole piece of cake is not going into your mouth, let me cut it into 4 small pieces and feed you one piece at a time so that you can digest it easily. And this is how Krishna, what he does, this concept of detached engagement, Krishna first divides it into dutiful engagement, and then the knowledge of engagement. Because knowledge ultimately gives you the detachment, right? So this is how in chapter number 3, he's going to talk about this dutiful engagement part. Then in chapter number 4, the Gyana Yoga there the word now Gyana Yoga is used. Do not confuse with the Gyana that we spoke about, the Sankhya that we spoke about. This is a different kind of knowledge. This is knowledge of work, knowledge of engagement. He's going to talk about it in chapter number 4, and he's going to integrate both of them in chapter number 5, and again repeat the concept of detached engagement in chapter number 5. We're going to elaborate that once again, right? So in this specific chapter, we are going to talk about this aspect of this dutiful engagement, and that is why the name Karma Yoga is given, right? So how does this this chapter proceed, right? So we saw in text number 1 to 2, we heard Arjuna's doubts. Arjuna's doubts. So after presenting these doubts, right? So then from text number 3 to text number 8, Krishna is going to give a very stern warning that disengagement is not necessarily the same as detachment. Or in other words, giving up your work or giving up your responsibility does not necessarily mean a sign of internal detachment, right? And Krishna is going to give some very, very heavy warning in that regard, right? So let's read some of those verses there, right? So text number 4, he says, "Oh Arjuna, don't think that merely abstaining from work you can achieve freedom from reaction. You are thinking that war means," because in Arjuna's head the equation was very simple. War equal to sin, right? War gives sin. So if I do not want sin, then what do I need to do? No sin means no war. That was the equation in Arjuna's head. But Krishna is saying, no, just by you staying away from a duty doesn't mean you are free from sin, because he says that just like a pretender, sometimes, you would have noticed, sometimes, if any of you ever tried fasting, on the fasting days, we think more about food than on normal days, right? So such fasting is not real fasting. In fact, technically, the Sanskritam word for fasting is upavasa. Upavasa means to sit near, literally, right? To sit near means what? To sit near the Lord, to sit near spirituality. The idea of fasting that day is you are so absorbed in spiritual activities that you don't have time to eat food. That's why you end up missing your meals, right? But rather, many times we do this upavasa or fasting as, staying away from food as the main goal of that particular day. And all day we are thinking about food, right? So Krishna points out that mentality, that text number 6, he says, one who restrains the senses of action, right? You're not acting, you're not using your tongue on the fasting day, but mind dwells on the sense objects. Your mind is constantly thinking of food, right? In fact, many times what happens on fasting day, we are already planning next day, what should I make? I'm going to eat pizza. I'm going to eat paratha. I'm going to eat khichdi with dahi and achar. You're already planning how to break your fast that day, right? Such a person whose mind is still dwelling on sense objects certainly deludes oneself and is called as a pretender, mithyachari. So he says, such a person who's disengaged, right? Externally giving up action, externally renouncing action, without internal detachment, such a person is a mithyachari, is a pretender. So Krishna is warning Arjuna, do not become a pretender like that. Rather, if a sincere person tries to control one's senses by engaging in karma yoga without attachment, he is by far more superior. like that. So so Krishna is inspiring that before you give up your action, don't think that just by giving up war you'll be free from sin, because your mind is still carrying that enmity, your mind is still carrying that grudge. Many times you would have seen that while dealing with people. Sometimes you would have had some issues with people in your life, and you think, okay, if I just stay away from that person, I will stop being hostile. But no, it doesn't work that way, because in your mind you're carrying that person and that hostility. You're only tormenting yourself more. That way, mentally you're creating a karma, you're creating sinful reaction, right? Rather, there is a way you have to positively engage and reconcile and get over that situation. Merely externally abstaining or repressing something, you're not solving a problem. That is an ostrich philosophy. I just hide my head in the sand and I've solved the problem, right? That kind of pretending is not the way that Bhagavad Gita recommends. Instead, let us be humble and start engaging in our dutiful work, right? And that's where the concept of duty is so beautifully explained. So from text number 9 through 16, one of the very, very important, powerful sections of Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna talks about the concept of yajna. Now, the word yajna, right? Many times, those of you who are familiar with the Indian, culture, we use the word yajna as that fire sacrifice, as a havan yajna, right? But look how beautifully Krishna extends this understanding of yajna. Yajna, or a sacrifice. Krishna equates it to the concept of your duty, right? Yajna is not just the act of calling a priest to your house and setting up that whole fire and putting the grains and the ghee and all kind of oblations in the fire, right? That kind of a havan, that is one kind of a yajna. But merely engaging in your prescribed duties is also yajna, right? And that whole science of yajna, Krishna explains from in text number 9 to 16. So he begins by saying, look, actually, work done as a yajnarthat karmano anyatra lokoyam karma bandhanaha. If you perform your duty with the sense of sacrifice, with an understanding that this is a sacred duty, this is my sacred duty, this is my divine responsibility. If you perform in your worldly responsibilities, if you take up your worldly responsibility with an understanding, that also is a yajna, and such a person will not get entangled in the bondage of work, because this is the system that the Lord created. Very beautifully, Krishna explains in the beginning of creation, right? At the time of creation, Krishna set up this whole system of devatas and us humans, right? Who are the devatas? Devatas are these cosmic admins. They are the cosmic administrators whose main role is to ensure that the entire universe is functioning in its proper state. Like how certain functions like the sun rising, the wind blowing, the rains occurring on proper time. So the entire operation of nature, imagine if the nature to be like a big machine, there are some cosmic administrators like devatas who are not operating on our earthly plane, but they are operating on a higher dimension, right? They are not so easily visible to us. When we discuss chapter number 8, we are going to elaborate more on this concept of multidimensional realities. But at this point, just take it as a fact, right? That there are dimensions of reality beyond what we see with our eye, what we perceive directly, right? So at a higher dimension, these devatas, they exist. And these cosmic administrators, they are the ones who are controlling the function of the day-to-day function of nature. And we humans are actually getting the benefits from nature, right? So if they are facilitating good nature, we facilitate them by performing this yajna. So this whole concept of yajna, is a very, very deep concept. Throughout the Vedic text, especially Rig Veda, elaborates a lot on this concept. In fact, in the Vedic culture, that is why the concept of respecting devatas as the representatives of the Lord, right? Understand the devatas in themselves are not the supreme Lord. So this is not this concept or this Vedic principle is not talking about some kind of a pantheistic model of multi gods, right? It's not talking about a polytheistic understanding of multiple gods, but it's talking about multiple cosmic administrators all working under the supervision of one monotheistic god, right? So this is still very much a monotheistic philosophy. Unfortunately, people do not understand this. Many times they misunderstand the Vedic philosophy to be some kind of a polytheistic model, right? But here we're talking about this one supreme Lord creating a system, just like how there's a prime minister of a president, creating a system of, there's an energy minister, there's a water minister, roadways minister, defense minister, home minister, right? And so on. Like there are the multiple ministers. And we humans, we citizens, just like how we have to pay taxes, right? So our way of paying taxes is performing this yajna. That way there's a mutual harmony between humans and devatas, right? And this system, Krishna explains through this beautiful concept called as the cycle of sacrifice, right? So how does he talk about the cycle of sacrifice? He says, look, all humans, right? We need grains. We need food grains to survive, right? So these grains, how do they come? They come from agriculture. And what is the main thing needed for agriculture? We need water, and water comes through rains, right? So what is annat bhavanti bhutani parjanyat anna sambhavat yagyat bhavanti parjanyo. Okay, now this is where now a whole complete shift in our paradigm is going to occur. How do rains take place, right? Now many of us who are trained in modern science, we may say that yes, rains take place because of the water cycle. When the sun evaporates water, the water transforms into clouds, and the clouds precipitate, and that is how rains take place, right? Yes, but if you understand, there is a nature's mechanism which you call as water cycle. And whenever there is a cycle, a mechanism, there has to be a controllers of this mechanism also. The traffic cannot flow smoothly on its own. There are traffic lights, there's a traffic cop. So this deeper understanding is what the Vedic philosophy presents, that it says that these rains occur not just by some random impersonal nature cycles, but there are these devatas who are involved, and these devatas perform when we perform our yajna. Right? Yajna or the sacrifice. So rains come from sacrifice. And yajna bhavanti parjanyat, yajna karma samudbhava. So this yajna is born out of one's prescribed duties or one's sacred duties. And this is where the principle of duty comes in, your prescribed duties. So this is such a beautiful concept of connecting our day-to-day living and being with transcendence, with the bigger universe. And this is the understanding that every Vedic student and every Vedic thinker needs to cultivate on the long term, which is that how each and every one of us, we are not living in an isolated, system, but rather we are all connected to this macrocosm called as the universe, called as a creation. Each of us, we may seem to operate like a microcosm, but this microcosm is also connected to that macrocosm. And there are these invisible strings binding all of us. So one individual breaking the string or going offset, or a group of individuals, disturbs the entire fabric of this creation, right? That is the fabric of order within this creation, right? And this is a very, very important concept for us. And this prescribed duties, right? Where are they mentioned? How do I know what is my prescribed duty? So this is all mentioned in the Vedas. The Vedas offer, they tell us where things are. And where are the and what are the Vedas? Where are they coming from? They are coming from the Supreme Lord. They are coming from the divine, right? So this is a cycle of sacrifice. And in the next word, just you see, right, of the cycle was complete, right? So when we get food, when we grow grains, we don't immediately want to enjoy them, but rather we complete the cycle by offering them to the Lord and accepting the result of that sacrifice. Technically, it is called as prasad, right? In India, we all know that prasad. Every temple you go, you get some prasad, the sanctified food, right? So what sanctifies food is this mood, the understanding that, look, I'm not living in this isolated microcosm, but rather I'm connected to this entire gigantic macrocosm. And I need to act in sync with this grander scheme of things that is happening in this universe. So this fine fabric of this universe, right? This is the whole cycle of sacrifice. This is the cycle of sacrifice. This is a concept which is very, very important for us to engage in our dutiful engagement, right? So if you remember, Arjuna, he raised his fourth argument, right? If you remember Arjuna's fourth argument, his argument was this whole destruction of family traditions, destruction of family tradition, basically the whole social fabric. If you remember, we discussed this, how the present generation will be destroyed. In the next generation, he uses the term Varna Sankaras. Varna Sankaras are unwanted progeny, right? And then the previous generation will also be lost because they don't get their sacrifice, the same principle of sacrifice that we discussed here, right? So here is Krishna giving an argument, the reply to this, saying that, look, Arjuna, if you break this fine fabric of the cycle of sacrifice, if you don't engage in your duty as a kshatriya, as a warrior, you have a particular ordained duty, a sacred duty according to the Vedas, which are given by the Supreme Lord. You as a kshatriya, you need to establish dharma. So if you don't engage in your prescribed duties, that is how you will be ruining the fabric of the society. So the answer to this fourth argument is that not engaging in prescribed duties, not engaging in prescribed duties, or if I may put it even more accurately, premature renunciation. Premature renunciation of one's prescribed duties is what that destroys the social fabric. And, believe it or not, my dear friends, this is what we are seeing in the society today. Today, we are so far off from this whole concept of sacrifice. Everything is about selfishness. Why am I working? Because I want to earn money. Why do you want to earn money? Because I want to enjoy. I want to buy those gadgets. I want this big home. I want this, car, etc., etc. It's all about me. More the society is becoming more and more selfish and has forgotten. It is not that the Vedic society did not include prosperity and enjoying one's wealth, right? But the principle was that you earn with integrity, right? And at the same time, share your earnings also with compassion and with the mood of sacrifice. That was the principle of this karma yoga, right? And when one does not do this properly, right? Either one is very blindly, engaging in one's duties out of selfishness, or prematurely even giving up one's duties or doing some nonsensical activities, right? That is how we are destroying the very fabric of the society. And that is what you are seeing today. When the society became more and more selfish, when industrialization, the purpose of industrialization was to, originally at least, the intention was good, trying to meet the needs of the masses. But then when the concept of production for the masses was lost and it became a whole mad mass production. Then we started exploiting nature. And today you see what we are facing, the whole massive climate change and the whole ecological crisis, right? We are disrupting the cycles of nature because of our human greed, right? So many aspects. Wherever, there has been this overindulgence, you can see a lot of things in terms of society, disruption of so many Vedic traditions, family structures, equality in society, respect to genders, all these social ills that we're talking about. This is unfortunately we don't look at this perspective. We always try to look at very, very case specific causes, but the deeper cause to many of, if not all, the social ills today is that how we have gone so far away from this concept of sacrifice, the concept of selfless sacrifice. Sacrifice includes selflessness, but the concept of selfless duties, right? And this is the important lesson that we pick up from this chapter on karma yoga, right? So then, after having described this, a slight detour in thought process, right, where from Krishna from 17 to 19, because after reading this section, somebody will feel, oh, it seems then everybody has to engage in prescribed duties, right? Nobody should be renouncing, right? Well, not necessarily. There are some advanced souls. For advanced souls, for them, there is no duty. So these are these great rishis, munis, who sometimes they socially they may seem to be unproductive, right? But actually they are very advanced. For them, these rules are not applicable. That is why, remember, I used the term, I corrected myself and I used the term premature renunciation. For such advanced souls, it is mature, realized renunciation, right? So there can be some exceptions. So this is the only exception. Otherwise, for 99.99% of the society, they have to engage in their prescribed duties, right? And Krishna goes on to say, even those advanced souls, right, from text number 20 to 35, he says, even those advanced souls, they sometimes act to set an example. They act to set an example, right? So there's a nice story in the Sufi tradition. So this one time a person, he was very fed up with this world. He wanted to renounce this world. So he gives up everything, goes to the forest, and builds himself a nice little hut. But then he saw that every day to maintain the hut, it was taking a lot of his time, and to cook, etc. He was not getting time for his sadhana and exploration, self-exploration. So he hires a housekeeper come cook. So life was going on. And one day when he was wandering in the forest, he felt a desperate need to find a guru. So in the forest, he encounters this big, this Baba with long beard and long hair, the typical ideal picture of how you expect a wandering monk to be like. So then he says, oh, Guruji, I found you. Please give me Diksha. Please give me your shelter. I want to become your disciple. Then he says, I don't mind taking you as a disciple, but I need to take permission from my own guru. And for the past many years, I've been looking for my teacher. I'm not able to find him. Once I find him, I will initiate you. I'll accept you as my student. Fine. 1 year happens, 2 year happens. Still, he's not able to find his guru, and this guy is not getting initiated. Then finally, one day he says, Guruji, at least, if not initiation, at least come to my house, my hut once. I want to offer you a good meal at least. So the Baba, he agrees, he comes home. And as soon as he goes home, the cook opens the door. As soon as the cook opens the door, this Baba, he immediately falls on the floor saying, Gurudev, where are you? Oh, my dear teacher, where are you? I've been looking for you for all these years. Right? And this guy is completely lost. Oh, so the cook, the person whom I thought was the cook, was actually the teacher of my teacher. Right? So this story is quoted just to show that, how sometimes advanced souls can come in different. They don't necessarily need to have those long beards and, big long hair. right? But sometimes these great souls, just to set an example, they can be like common people among us. They can be in the form of businessmen, politicians, right? Ordinary people among us as well. So, and Krishna gives an example of two very exalted personalities. He gives an example of King Janaka. King Janaka, the famous King Janaka, the father of Sita Devi, he was known to be such a advanced soul, such a renowned and such a detached soul. It is described as one time to his kingdom, some wandering monks had actually come, and they were trying to test Janaka, because everybody in the world was glorifying this king, that, oh, how great, renounced king he was. So the king, being the very generous, hospitable person, he provides them all little huts to live, right? And every evening they would have discussion, philosophical discussions. So this one day during the discussion, the minister of King Janaka, he comes and says, "Oh, sire, your treasury is on fire." Then Janaka says, "No, don't disturb me now. I'm serving the sadhus. I'm serving these great souls here. So you handle the situation yourself." Then he goes away, right? Completely detached. Even the entire treasury was on fire. He understood his duty to serve great souls. So then after some time, he comes running. "Oh, sire, the fire has spread all the sadhus." And as soon as the sadhus, the traveling monks, when they heard that their huts are on fire, immediately they ran to grab their possessions. Right? Now imagine, what possessions do these have? Few clothing and maybe a pot of water or something like that. Right? So this story is quoted just to show that how it's not the external setup that determines one's level of internal advancement or detachment. So King Janaka is one example, and Krishna quotes his own example. He says, "Oh Arjuna, there is no work for me prescribed within all these three planetary systems. I am actually beyond this worldliness, but yet when I come here, I engage like all of you, a common man like all of you. I have to do my prescribed duties just to set a right example. Otherwise, people tomorrow, already people try to criticize Krishna, right? But nobody sees, how Krishna lived such an exemplary life, as in Dwaraka, as a king. He perfectly fulfilled his responsibilities as a member of the royal clan, as a husband, as a father. And unfortunately today, so many people try to misquote these pastimes or create their own stories and their own versions, and they try to malign the character of Krishna. But actually Krishna himself is so conscious about his own personal conduct, that what example people will take like that. And he says, "For if I ever fail to engage in my prescribed duties, certainly all people will follow my path, and that way whole world will be ruined, and it will lead to Varna Sankara." So basically the point Krishna is saying is if exemplary people, yadyat acharti sheshtas, if exemplary people, they don't live according to their own exemplary ways, to the prescribed ways, then common people will follow them, and that's how the entire social fabric will be destroyed. That is why the destruction of every society does not begin at the bottom, it begins at the top. When the leadership fails, the society cracks. When the leadership is exemplary, then the society flourishes. Right? This is an important Vedic principle that we see here, like that. So then the question comes, okay, you are King Janaka and Krishna, you are all very advanced souls, you are internally detached, but how to deal with someone who's not detached? Right? Very, very powerful principle that comes in 25 and 26. Text 25 and 26. How, as a spiritualist, when you are trying to impart these teachings to ordinary people, right, do not try to thrust these, high, lofty principles of detachment upon them, but rather learn to engage them, learn to engage people according to their nature, and gradually elevate their consciousness, right? So this principle of engaging people according to one's nature is a very important concept that we're going to talk a little later in today's discussion, like that. And then after having spoken about this, right, There are such amazing verses here in this section, but we are trying to maintain the flow of thought and simplify the understanding. But please do read in during the week every verse, and especially Prabhupada's explanation of these verses are so potent, right? And text 27 also. What is the problem with the ordinary people is, ordinary people, they don't, it is not a sense of duty which drives them. For ordinary people, duty is not the driving force. A sense of duty or responsibility is not their driving force, but their ego. Ahankara vimudhatma karta aham iti manyate. I am the doer. I am the enjoyer. Because I am the doer, I have to enjoy. Right? Why should I sacrifice? I worked so hard. I earned this money. Therefore, I will spend it the way I want. Right? But Krishna explains, no. Do you think you can work without your body and mind support? Right? And who's controlling your body and mind? Again, the concept of these cosmic administrators, the devatas, they are not just controlling the nature, they're also controlling us. Right? In the broader scheme of things, Prakriti is controlling us. Prakrute kriyamanani. The three modes of material nature are what that are doing things in a deeper. This is a concept that will elaborate more. Is Prakriti the doer or am I the doer? This is a concept we'll elaborate more in the 5th chapter. But at this point, just understand that our body and mind is an important faculty that we use, which is not fully in our control. Right? So therefore, why the ego that I am the doer? Right? So this is the flaw with people who are not spiritually minded. Right? So therefore, engage such people according to their nature and gradually elevate them. So they come out of the influence of their own ego, like that. So then, in text number 30, very, very important sutra. In fact, I call this as the definition of Karma Yoga. This is one of the key verses of this chapter. Right? He says, what is Lord Krishna says? Mai sarvani karmani. Oh Arjuna, surrender all your work unto me, sannyasa adhyatma chetasa, with full knowledge of me, right? Surrender, renounce your the fruits of your work, nirashir, without any expectation, without any desire for profit. Nirmama, mamatva means I am the doer, without any claim for proprietorship. Bhutva, with that mentality, yuddhasva vigata jvara. When the moment you say you are not the doer, you are not the enjoyer, then you will think, then why should I do? Because for most of us, our motivation is either I want to get the thrill of doing things or I want to enjoy the thrill of the result, right? But Krishna is saying you are neither the doer nor the enjoyer. Then why should I be motivated? It says, yuddhasya vigata jvara. Still give up this lethargy and fight. This is the definition of Karma Yoga in text number 30. So what does it say? So surrendering your work, right? Which means surrendering the fruits of your work. Mai sarvani karmani sannyasa adhyatma chetasa nirashir, right? Without desire for profit and without proprietorship or without ego, simple, right? And even without any lethargy. Lethargy, fight. Fight was a yuddhasya vigata jvara. Fight was the definition for Arjuna because as a kshatriya, that was his duty. But the principle for us is engage in our prescribed duties. So this is the mood. This is the attitude for a karma yogi, that they don't want to be carried away by their ego. And at the same time, they don't want to be lethargic. They don't want to compromise in how much they want to, whatever responsibility that they need to fulfill, without any desire for profit, and just surrendering the work to the Lord, right? And that yoga connection, because of that higher connection of surrendering, it becomes a very powerful process, right? That is why it is karma yoga. So it is not just about being detached, but while being detached in your work, you are also surrendering to the Lord. And that is a mood, that is where the spiritual connection comes, right? So this is a very powerful definition of karma yoga, right? So then after describing this, right, then he says, therefore understand this principle of work, right? So don't artificially give up work. Do not artificially give up work, because Krishna explains that each and every one of us, we all have a inbuilt nature, right? The concept of nature is now going to come up. We all have our nature basically comprised of these three gunas, three modes: sattva, rajas and tamas, right? And this nature is like a, our inclination is like a push from within, right? And that motivates us, that drives us, that defines our worldview, how we do things, how we approach to life itself. So you cannot suppress that nature. Nigraham kim karishyati, Krishna explains, right? That he says that he says sadisham chesase swaha prakriter Gyanavan api prakritim yanti bhutani nigraham kim karishyati. Even a person of knowledge acts according to one's own nature. Even though you may be knowing so many things, but when a time to act comes, you are pushed according to your nature. Therefore, everyone has to follow their nature. What can repression accomplish? So artificially repressing one's nature, suppressing one's nature, is not sustainable in the long run. Therefore, Krishna says that better to channelize your nature according to these principles of karma yoga, and that is how you can attain transcendence. And then one very, very powerful verse, he says, text number 35, which is also kind of a little bewildering verse. He says, it is far better to discharge one's own prescribed duties, even though faultily, than to do others' duties perfectly. Destruction in the course of performing one's duty is better than engaging in another's duty, because following another's duty is a dangerous path. Let's deliberate on this. This is a very interesting verse. He's saying that better, so your path or nature, follow it even if you fail. But others' path, right? But say no to others' path, even if you are successful. Now, this is a paradigm that will completely bewilder the modern society. What? You are saying to be a failure is better than to be successful? What kind of a logic is this, right? Now, if you look at it from the worldly perspective of profit and gain, this logic makes no sense. From a worldly perspective, this logic makes no sense. But Bhagavad Gita is not a worldly book. Bhagavad Gita is a book for us to use this world to transcend the world, right? And that is where, the real happiness is. So for someone who does not understand this concept, this logic may not make much sense. So what is the intention of Krishna? What is the deeper meaning here is, right? Again, very, very important concept. Work is not for profit. The deeper purpose of work is not profit. Profit could be one of the means, one of the goals of work, but that is not the only goal. In fact, the deeper goal of work is purification of heart or purification of one's consciousness, purification of our very existence, right? So when we go through failures internally purify the heart, and that way you are more successful. Sometimes when you may be externally successful, right? But in the course of, it is not that again any kind of failure is a purification, right? Understand, when you're performing your prescribed duty out of a mood of sacrifice, here I am engaging this duty because it is a sacred duty, because it's a higher duty prescribed to me. And in the course of doing that, if I fail, it will be purification of my heart. If I'm successful, I gain success and I continue ahead in that journey. So the point is, from the soul's perspective, that failure is not failure, it's a success. And again, from the soul's perspective, success in somebody else's path means you are only getting entangled more and more in this whole world of profit and gratification, right? So this is the deeper principle, that work is not just meant for profit, but the deeper principle of our prescribed duties. Work here also includes prescribed duties. Work or prescribed duties is meant for purification of the heart, right? And that is why you see, just by in the Vedic culture, that is why these value systems were naturally ingrained in the society, because people would just follow their prescribed duties, they follow their nature, and just lead their life according to such higher principles. And that is how these higher value systems were naturally ingrained in them. They didn't have to work hard, because the purification of heart would automatically happen, right? And that is where I remember this one time having a conversation with a very advanced advocate. In fact, he was the head of the bar council of one of the states, and he was explaining that it's very easy to say, for as ordinary people will say, okay, create this law, right? But he was saying that when you create a law, you also have to create a law enforcing agency. And how many agencies will you set up? How much will you keep chasing the people? How much police force you will require to ensure that the law happens? And the right way, because by enforcing law, you cannot control the society. You have to inspire a natural change. You have to inspire the purity in the heart of the people. That is why you can create a ordered society, right? When the order fails, or when the purity of heart fails, then to enforce order, you need force, you need policing, you need law and order structures, right? So this is a very, very powerful, striking point which I felt when I had conversation with that person. So he was coming from a very strong law background, right? So that was how the Vedic society was, or any progressive society will be, right? Not just in the past, even now we can create that. If we understand this one principle, that through my work, through prescribed duties, I'm working for the sake of purification of my heart. Success or failure are secondary, like that. So then, now this whole profound concept made Arjuna thinking, set his whole thinking process, right? And then Arjuna then asks a very powerful question. So text number 36 to 43, Arjuna raises a very interesting question on the obstacles in in Karma Yoga process. If I want to really implement this Karma Yoga in my life, there are some obstacles that will come, right? So before we jump into that obstacle, I'll explain what the background is. So far what we understood is, Karma Yoga means following one's nature, right? Now, when we use the word nature, inherently within nature, there are two dimensions. There is a higher nature and there's a lower nature. The higher nature is what we call our inclinations, right? Our inclinations. Each and every one of us, we are inclined in a certain way. Our inclinations in terms of somebody wants to be an artist, somebody wants to be a lawyer, somebody wants to be a police person, somebody wants to be an engineer, etc., right? We all have certain inclinations, right? But along with these inclinations, we also have some lower nature, which we call as cravings, right? So how do I deal with these cravings? Because the moment you follow your nature, moment you're letting your nature loose, you're also letting your cravings loose, right? So what exactly is this inclination and cravings and nature? We will elaborate that in the next slide, right? So the Vedic concept of nature and inclination is very, very simple. Today, there are multiple personality tests and, systems of personality tests, multiple models of personality tests and all that. They're all very good. They will give very, very fine details. But the Vedic system was very, very simple and fourfold. Basically, our inclinations or our nature is a combination of these three gunas. So it mainly talks about 4 kinds of inclinations or 4 compositions of gunas. So the first combination is where there is a very high level of sattva and there is a low level of rajas and practically negligible tamas. Practically negligible tamas. That is one combination. Then there's another combination where there is a low level of sattva but a high level of rajas and again little or negligible level of tamas. Right? And the third combination is little low level of sattva, but there is a high level of rajas, but now the tamas is also, it earlier, if you notice, that was a little dotted thing, but now tamas is also little prominent. Then the fourth combination again is little or no sattva. Even the rajas is also low, but the tamas is very prominent, right? Now understand, many times this is a concept we'll elaborate more in the 14th chapter again when the 3 gunas are spoken of. Many times we carry premature understanding that sattva is good and tamas is bad, right? But from the Vedic perspective, it is not, that's not the right understanding. This is just a composition of one's psychology and physiology, right? Our purpose is still sattvic. The moment you are saying I'm following my prescribed duty, our purpose is still very sattvic, right? So we're not talking about tamas here in a very derogatory way. But these 4 combinations are what are referred to in the Vedic society as, here are the thinkers, visionaries, also referred to as the brahmanas. Then here are the administrators, lawyers, CEOs, kshatriyas, they come in that category. Then here are the resource managers, providers. Basically, they are the ones who provide to the society. They are the ones who create wealth and asset to the society. All the business community, they entrepreneurs, they all come in this third category, right? And the fourth category is the ordinary, salaried employees, if I may say, employees, right? Who are very good, very consistent in just doing what they want to do. That's the property of tamas. It gives grounding, right? So they are very consistent in doing what they are meant to do, like that. So the society is organized that way. Again, the concept which we'll elaborate more in the later on chapters. But the important thing for us to note here is, if you look at this chart, which guna is common to all of them, right? If you look at this chart, it is this rajogun is the common guna, the common material mode to all these 4 inclinations. And because of this rajogun, this rajas also creates our lower nature of cravings as in wanting to enjoy, right? And when Arjuna, the thoughtful person, look how thoughtful person is, immediately Arjuna thought of applying this whole concept of prescribed duty, yagya, I really want to apply it in my life. But something within me, some lower nature within me wants me to crave, the cravings within me wants me to enjoy. What is that, Krishna? he asks. So in text number 36, he asks, Atha kena prayuktena papam charati purushaha. Oh Krishna, by what is one impelled to sinful acts, even unwillingly, as if engaged by force? That's a property of nature. It is like a force. It is like a, anichan api vashnaya baladeva. Baladeva means like a force. What is that inner craving like a force? Then Krishna explains, oh, kama esha krodha esha rajoguna samudbhava. So these cravings, Krishna uses the term here as kama. Kama, Prabhupada translates it as lust. Right? But the lust here is not in a very carnal, sensual way. Lust in general, the broader meaning of the word lust here is cravings or desires. So, or materialistic, selfish, that enjoyment tendency is what we are referring to. And that's what this Rajoguna does. Right? So Krishna says, actually, the obstacle that we face in this Karma Yoga process is those lower cravings. And Krishna says, you have to overcome these cravings. Right? And he gives a very beautiful example also. How do you understand these cravings? He gives 3 examples. First, he gives, to understand the science of cravings, he says, each of us, we are affected at 3 progressively increasing levels. At the lowest more level, it is like fire covered by smoke. Fire covered by smoke. Second level, he gives mirror covered by dust. And third is the embryo covered by the womb. Right? Very, very interesting example. So how do you analyze this? So if you look at it from the visibility to 2 levels, visibility and utility. Right? If you look at it from these 2 perspectives, right? Fire covered by smoke, yeah, it's kind of visible. You can still see there is fire there, right? And it also has some utility. You can definitely use a smoky fire to cook something, right? Now, mirror covered by dust. At least you know that there is a mirror there. At least the visibility is clear, right? But in terms of utility, there is absolutely no utility of such a dust-laden mirror. Then the embryo covered by womb, you cannot even see that there is embryo there. And definitely the embryo in the womb is practically useless in terms of productive work, right? So that way, these are 3 levels Krishna talks about. What exactly is Krishna referring to? He's referring to different species of life. How the soul in this material world is covered by, its consciousness is covered by these 3 layers. So fire covered by smoke is usually referred to as the humans. Mirror covered by dust is the animals. And the embryo covered by womb are the trees and, very, very lower, who cannot really express themselves also. It is animals can express themselves. They have some utility, something, they can, they look a little more sophisticated, right? In terms of expressions. Humans, of course, are even more open, more evolved that way. So he says, this is how this lower nature covers you. So that's how the lust covers you, or this cravings cover you. So it is important for us to target this and to resolve this. And how does Krishna, what is the solution Krishna gives? Very, very important part. So the important lesson here is, in Karma Yoga, the obstacle is our cravings, our lower nature, our cravings, right? And the solution that Krishna gives, right? What does he say? He says, understand where this lust resides. He says that the senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of this calm, of this cravings, right? And, oh Arjuna, therefore, right from the beginning, curb this very symbol of sin by regulating your senses. So the solution Krishna gives is regulate the senses. It's very interesting that the solution Krishna gives, right? Because Just later on, if you see in couple of verses, Krishna says that, we spoke the different residing places, right? We spoke of senses, mind, and the intelligence. So in a couple of verses later, Krishna explains the hierarchy of this. He says, senses are inferior to the mind is inferior to the intelligence, and of course, beyond all of them is the soul. So if the soul is the most powerful entity, doesn't it make sense to directly approach the soul? Right? Well, the answer is no. Such a technique is applicable for somebody who's already very spiritually advanced. But for somebody who's a beginner, Krishna gives an outside-in approach, right? He gives a very, what I like to call as, he gives a very Somato psychic approach. Somato psychic approach, right? So what do I mean by psychosomatic? Some of you might have heard this term, right? Which means that how the mind is influencing the body, right? Yes. So sometimes when you're going through some anxiety, you will see, you have labored breathing, you're restless, like how Arjuna was in the beginning of in the end of the first chapter, we saw that, right? So the body and mind are connected. And when our inner mind and intelligence, when they are overcome by these cravings, sometimes it's very difficult to approach the mind, tell your mind that, okay, control your mind. You cannot just say, okay, let me start meditating now. It doesn't work. Or you cannot intellectually control yourself saying, no, succumbing to these cravings is a great sin. Do not succumb. Even the intelligence gets bewildered at that point. But the senses are a low-hanging fruit. It's easy to control the senses. And because the senses are linked to the mind, by controlling the senses, by regulating the senses, you can also regulate the mind. This is the outside-in approach, or the somato-psychic approach. Somata, by using the body, I control the mind. This is the whole foundation of the yoga philosophy, the yoga science, where by using some external actions, by yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, I'm able to control the mind and pacify the mind. Then I can enter into the deeper state of dhyan, dharana, and samadhi, like that, right? And more so in our practical life also, it is good to follow some kind of an external discipline. So set yourself so regulating your senses here means following some kind of a disciplined lifestyle. Following some kind of a disciplined lifestyle, right? So set yourself some kind of a lifestyle, external prohibitions or barriers. So that way your senses, when they're regulated, the mind is relatively more peaceful. This is not the ultimate solution, because we have, this is still chapter 3, right? We have to go till chapter 18. But for a beginner, this is such a powerful solution, or a powerful technique to control the mind, like that. Okay. I'll very quickly summarize. We again discussed a lot, very, very powerful and a lengthy chapter, right? So this chapter begins with Arjuna's confusion. What is Arjuna's confusion? As we saw here, from the action column, both fruitive work, sakama karma, attached engagement, and buddhi yoga, detached engagement, they look the same. And that was Arjuna's vision. Therefore, he's saying, Krishna, if you presented Gyana on the higher level, why are you again asking me to work like in buddhi yoga? But Krishna's perspective was not the action column, but his perspective was the detachment column. From a detachment perspective, both Gyana and buddhi yoga are at the same level. There is no difference. Though externally there is action in one and there is no action in other one, from detachment, both of them give the same result of detachment. That was Krishna's perspective, and that was what he was recommending. But because Arjuna did not understand this second column, so Krishna, being the expert teacher, he dissects the concept of detached engagement into dutiful engagement and then knowledge of engagement. So this is how third, fourth chapters are going to be laid out for us. So then he begins after Arjuna's question, he kind of mildly rebukes Arjuna, saying detachment does not come just by giving up work. It is a mindset, it's an attitude. You have to develop that attitude. So if you prematurely renounce, then you'll end up becoming a pretender. Better mature into that state, and that maturity comes first by engaging in your dutiful work. And the dutiful work, he used the concept of yajna. So not just a fire sacrifice, but you are engaging in your prescribed responsibilities of life itself is a yajna, because that is ordained by the Lord through the Vedas, through this prescribed duties. This is the whole cycle of sacrifice. And it is a cycle of sacrifice that maintains this fine fabric of society. The moment you break that fabric, through premature renunciation or by not engaging in prescribed duties, you are destroying that fabric. That is how you are creating Varna Sankaras. That is how the fourth argument Krishna counteracts. Then, after describing that for advanced souls, there is no duty. Even those advanced souls, they engage in prescribed duties just to set an example for ordinary people like us. And he quotes his own example and King Janaka. Right? And then the very definition of this Karma Yoga comes in text number 30. Right? And then he basically tells that, we all have a nature which is defined by these three gunas. Right? So you cannot artificially give up your nature. You cannot artificially give up your work. Better, understand that work is not meant for profit, not for success or failure, but work is meant for purification of your heart. That's the advantage of following one's nature, or that's the purpose of following one's nature or following one's prescribed duties. Right? And then when Arjuna started thinking, it makes sense. As a Kshatriya, I need to follow my duty, but why did I get distracted? There is some inner craving, some push within me, some strong urge within me, which is pushing me in the negative direction. What is that? So that Krishna explained that nature, along with giving your inclination, your instincts, it also gives your lower cravings. There's a lower nature also. And that lower nature mainly comes because of the Rajoguna. And therefore, we need to curb this kama, this lust, this material cravings, this lower nature of material cravings. We need to control this. And he talks about the different levels in which the soul, different kinds of species are covered. And these lower cravings can be overcome by regulating your senses, by following a disciplined lifestyle. Once you regulate your senses, then you will be able to pacify the mind to a major extent. That is the outside-in approach, the Somato psychic approach that Krishna is recommending to Arjuna in this particular chapter, like that. All right. So with this, we end today's discussion. Let me now open the forum for any questions or comments that we have. So you can please raise your hand if you have any questions. Okay, I can already see a couple of questions. Okay, so one question somebody asked here is that how are we facilitating the devatas by respecting them? Right? So the system of yajna, when we perform a yajna, for example, in a typical way, let's take a fire sacrifice in the first place. In the fire sacrifice, when we invoke the yajna purusha, when we invoke the Lord as a yajna purusha, the limbs of that yajna purusha are these various devatas. So by offering oblations into that fire yajna, indirectly we are serving, or we are offering the offerings, the oblations to the devatas. And that is how the devatas get their benefit. Because the devata loka, they don't engage in work. That's not the world of karma. Our world is a world of karma. So we engage in karma, we offer the fruits to them, they enjoy that fruits, and in return, they bless us by creating an order in the society. That's the whole concept of working in correlation or in tandem with the devatas, like that. Right? So then we have another question which says, Rupanuga Das Prabhu has asked this question, that what should we do if someone asks us to do a seva? She's not in the mood to do. Should we do it or not? If we do, we are going against our prescribed duties. Right? Okay, if somebody is asking us to do somebody else's work, I'm guessing if somebody else's seva is being thrusted upon us, I'm guessing that is your question, right? So so this, we have to understand that, yes, each and every, so sometimes in an emergency situation, you may kind of fill in because there is because you're talking about seva here, I'm presuming it is under some kind of a spiritual guidance and so on. So sometimes for the higher purpose of getting that work done, you may engage in somebody else's seva, but in the long run, you will see it will burn you out it will also make the other person lazy. So that is where now you need to, because it is happening under a particular system, particular order, it is always good to, approach whoever is, assigning these sevas for you. Good to approach them in a very genuine mood and understand your deeper concern here, not with a sense of complaining that, oh, look, that person is lazy and I'm getting worked out here all day. Not with that mood, but with the understanding that, this broader concept that we discussed here, that, it's about you are genuinely caring for the other person also in while presenting that, right? Okay. So then, okay, Ankit is asking this question: are we eternally conditioned? Okay, so that's a very deep question. A concept that we will touch upon in the 9th chapter again, but I'll give a very quick answer, Ankit. Are we eternally conditioned? Well, the term that is used is anadi. In the Vedic scriptures, this karma bandhan or this conditioning, it is said anadi. This avidya or spiritual ignorance which is covering the soul, it is said that there is no point of time where you can actually put it. That's why the term that is used many times in the scriptures is called nitya baddha, means eternally conditioned, right? Of course, there's some more technicalities to it, but at this point, I think, or at this level of our discussion, you can say the answer is yes, we are eternally conditioned to the gunas, like that. Okay. So Kirti ji is asking this question that, tell us more about disciplined lifestyle. What does it include? Okay, good. The whole idea of disciplined lifestyle, Krishna is going to elaborate in the 17th chapter and 18th chapter also. But as a simple thing, understand it all begins with few very, very basics. Like, for example, what kind of food that you eat. Try to have sattvic diet. Try to have, and how are you conducting your life? Try to cultivate sattvic thoughts. Try to cultivate sattvic habits, right? So in a sense, disciplined life is all about that. Like Srila Prabhupada, when he instituted this International Society for Krishna Consciousness, he gave very, very simple formula. For this, all the sattvic lifestyle, it comes by, you must have heard about these 4 regulative principles. The deeper understanding behind those 4 regulative principles are, when we talk about, no meat eating, but essentially what we're trying to do is uphold this principle of ahimsa in our life. So that way, that can be a good virtue. So try to see, can I become so disciplined that I minimize the violence? You can never become fully ahimsa until you become like a pure devotee or something. But at least at our level, try to minimize the level of violence that you're causing in your life to the people around you, even by the products that you're buying. Be a very conscious consumer that way, right? That is one principle you can understand, right? Then the second principle of no intoxication, basically developing a sense of compassion. Deepen that pillar of compassion in your life. Think beyond yourself. Don't be selfish, but think beyond that. That can be a good principle of discipline in your life. No illicit sex means developing a sense of cleanliness. Deepen that pillar of cleanliness. Cleanliness here means your internal and external cleanliness. That's why clean your simple thing, like in Vedic culture, you would see every person when they wake up early in the morning, the first thing that they would is clean their body, then clean the house, clean the temple of the Lord. That is how they begin their day. Something so basic like that will induce a strong discipline and sattvic mode of goodness within you, right? And the last principle of no gambling, right? That is, develop a sense of honesty, right? Honesty to yourself, right? Don't cheat yourself also, right? And to whatever level you can cultivate the principle of honesty with the world around you, right? So when I say honesty, again, it's all very deeper principles. Basically, try to be genuine, be authentic to yourself and with others. Don't hide behind these veils. So if you can bring in this discipline in your life, then you will see that how naturally a lot of sattvicness will automatically follow in your life, and you'll be able to live by these principles that we are discussing here, like that. Okay. So then, okay, there's another question about what devata do if not karma. Okay, Okay, okay. In my answer to the previous question, I mentioned how devatas. So the devaloka is not a place of karma, but it's a place where you discharge your karma. To give a simple example, going to higher planet, the Swarga lokas or the higher dimensions, is like going on a vacation. Like you go to Switzerland or some, some nice exotic location. How long can you be in that location? As long as you have money in your wallet, right? Once you run out of money in your wallet, what do? You have to come back to earth or come back to your city, go back to your job, earn money, and again you have to spend there, right? So think of this whole karma to be like your credit account. The more credit account you have, so what happens in the devalokas is, the living entity is there, they're just enjoying their past karmas that they have accumulated, and they're just spending it, and once they are done with that, again they have to come back to our karma loka and earn more. But when we engage in yajnas, we are transferring some of that karma to them, and that way, I wouldn't say the word karma, that may be a wrong application, but we are transferring some credit to them, and that way they are gaining. As a result, they use their power and their faculties to ensure peace and prosperity for us also. That was the system of mutual understanding that the Lord created. It is not, again, at a pure spiritual level, it may look like some business transaction, but understand at a at an ordinary level, rather than some kind of an animalistic, selfish living that we do in the modern society today, following this principle is a great advancement, right? So this recommendation is given also in the Vedic principles. It's very much a direct Vedic principle. Otherwise, why would Krishna talk about that in the Bhagavad Gita like that? Okay. So here is a slightly longer question. Let me read this. So Durga Mahapatraji is saying, whether conscious cravings only to execute the survival process of life is also higher rajas in nature, whether yogic process are only way to lower the senses. Deep attention to life experience also make us wiser. Kindly suggest. Yes, Mahapatraji, that's the whole idea. So the point of, remember when I said following a disciplined lifestyle, when you follow that sattvic lifestyle, you are going through this deeper life. When you say deep life experiences, means your consciousness should be deep enough to grab that, to be aware enough to grab those experiences. And that comes only when the consciousness is illuminated by sattva guna, right? So yes, when you say the yogic process of controlling the senses, right, that is one recommendation. But here again, we are not doing that kind of an artificial, forceful way of controlling the senses also. But just when you follow a sattvic disciplined lifestyle, right, it is not that you're depriving your senses, but you're just channelizing and engaging the senses in an alternative way. That way you're not stopping the flow. The energy of the senses is like a flowing river. You cannot stop energy, but you can divert it in a safe route. That's what we are trying to do with disciplined lifestyle. So yes, definitely part of that is gaining those life experiences also. Okay. Okay, Suresh ji is asking a very practical question. Can doing the trading business in shares will also be considered as gambling? Okay, yeah, this is a very tricky question, right? Well, what is your intention behind that trading business, right? So if you are merely interested in just taking those blind risks and risking your own income and risking the responsibility of taking care of your family, etc., then yes, it is a kind of gambling, right? But even every stock market expert will tell you that don't gamble with your money. Know what is happening in the world around you. Understand that how the market is playing and then invest your money. Even expert stock market people, whoever have made money in the stock market also, they also give the advice that don't gamble. So it's not just Krishna or me saying don't gamble in stock market, but even stock market experts are saying that don't gamble in stock market, but rather understand what is the whole, how the geopolitical situations are playing. Okay, Russia has declared war on Ukraine. So what implications will it have? What shares will go up? What shares will go down? Petrol prices are growing. And so on, food, edible prices are going. So understand these. So even experts advise that. So my reply to this is that, gambling is prohibited even both by stock market people and even by spiritualists. So better you be wise while investing in this shares as well. All right. Okay. All right. So I think if we have no further questions or comments, we'll end the discussion here. If somebody wants to verbally ask a question, do you want to unmute yourself and ask a question? You can raise your hand. Otherwise, we kind of overshot. It's already 9 minutes beyond our time. So thank you all so much once again for our discussion, and see you all tomorrow. Now, here's a little lead into tomorrow's discussion. At this point, we understood that I need to engage follow my nature, follow the prescribed duties, and then follow in my whatever worldly responsibilities and so on. But sometimes I may be stuck in my role, or I may be stuck in a wrong role, and it's too late for me to change some things in life. So if I cannot reset my life, how do I follow this principle of yajna, right? And how will I purify myself? So that is the next level knowledge. When you understand the dynamics of work, when you understand the knowledge of work, then we will be engaging in yajna in a more deeper and profound way. That concept, a very practical concept, Krishna is going to talk about tomorrow. So see you all tomorrow for this very, very deeper and profound session. So we will end now with our closing prayers. Joining your palms together. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunattu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So thank you all so much. See you in the next session. We are going to talk about Gyana Yoga, chapter number 4. Hare Krishna.